What's up, folks? This is Tony Brewer. You're listening to or watching, as the case may be, Cogitations. Cogitations is the podcast where we think about things, we contemplate them, we turn them over in our minds, and we discuss them. Daniel chapter 7, verse 28, Daniel writes, "Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me. My countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart." And we're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We're going to talk about it. Today, we're going to talk about Free for All Friday. I've got one from a listener. Now, full transparency, this is not one that a listener sent me through the email or anything like that. This listener is a friend on Facebook, and he made this into a post, and he sent this to me, probably looking for some of my feedback on it. I gave it, and I appreciate it. I did want to develop it, though, because it's really good, and I think it's really good content. We need to talk about this. So, the Free for All Friday question that we're going to address has to do with marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And I'm going to try to treat it very well. As we do on Free for All Friday, I want your comments, your questions, your observations, and after we get through this, we'll do the question, comments, and observations. Once we start getting enough people in watching the live show, once the locals community builds, it's going to be hopping, and we'll have a lot more interaction on our live streams. I'm really happy with the progress that we've made. It's been a really good effort. And for those of you that have been listening to me for years, you know that we have greatly revamped our workflow and how we put out content, the way we address content. So for those of you that have been with me for a long time, I'm talking about the last decade, it seems like, thank you. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart. Let's get into it. Free for All Friday. Unhappy, unheard, uncorrected. When churches fail women by telling them what they want to hear. Before we jump in, let me tell you real quick about the Tony Bruin. You didn't hear that wrong. Bruin, that means bear. The Tony Bruin community on Locals. I built that page because I got tired of watching truth get throttled, buried, and twisted by the platforms that are supposed to help us connect. Over there, on the Locals, I post teachings, questions, articles, behind-the-scenes stuff, whatever I think will help us grow and help us bond as a community. And I'm the world's worst at that bonding at the community, so I would love for us to get some people over there that enjoy the page, enjoy the community, and will help us grow. I want people who are bought into the mission. And if you're following on Locals, Tony Bruin on Locals, the Tony Bruin community, you're going to see all of it, with the exception of some stuff that I've got for our monetary supporters. There will be no filters. It's not a fan club. It's not about a spotlight. It's just a good, solid space where folks who care about the truth can stay grounded and stay in touch. You can be a follower or you can be a supporter. When we reach 50 supporters, we unlock the second tier on Locals. That gives me the tools to live stream for 2 hours at a time, plus some other features that will help us really build the community. If you're serious about that kind of thing, if it's something you want to participate in, if you want to grow something that reasonably can't be taken away, head over there. You'll be glad you did. Now, as to the question, I want to begin by stating something that I say often. I have a rule. I have a few cardinal rules, and one of these cardinal rules, I do not comment on private or personal situations when I've only heard one side. Meaning, I almost never, ever comment on a personal situation. I don't believe one can ever know the whole story, and it is unfair to the people involved. There may well be legitimate reasons that are unknown to the public for the person or to the person asking the question. However, what I will say is based off of my personal observation and experience, which is fairly widespread. So my comments today are not about any specific person, man, woman, or any specific congregation. What I want to do is take the general principle and explore it from a biblical standpoint. The reason I give this caveat is because with these kind of questions, Questions about suicide are one of those. Questions about abortion. It's very difficult to have a logical conversation and to be as scathing about these topics as you need to be without triggering somebody's emotion. And I'm not saying that pejoratively. I'm saying that's the human condition, and we have to dwell with one another in knowledge and understand that and have empathy. For instance, I put, it's been a few weeks ago. I wonder if I can find it. Quickly. I'm going to go to my personal profile here. I shared a lot of stuff on Facebook. I don't share much on Facebook. I'm going to stop right here. So the slippery slope. Nope. Wrong one. I shared it way back farther than that. Right here. So if divorce offered no financial gain, the divorce rate would probably drop 95% instantly. Well, that's a hyperbolic statement. Let me read you my post that I made about it. People often misinterpret the claim that divorce is driven by financial gain. The pic in the post is not mine, nor are they my words. The real issue isn't that people marry to cash out. It's that financial incentives remove friction, and they remove it unequally. Before no-fault divorce, you had to prove serious wrongdoing to end a marriage. Now one person can just walk away without cause and often be rewarded for doing so. The courts regularly favor women in custody, alimony, and asset division. That's why about 69% of divorces are initiated by women, which I think is a pretty conservative estimate by most people's standards. Most people put it up to about 80% and even higher. And among college-educated women, that number jumps to 90%, not always out of malice, but because the system makes leaving easier, safer, and sometimes financially beneficial. It's not equality. It's a lopsided exit ramp. If financial incentives were removed from the equation. In other words, if you had to prove fault, and once you proved fault, and the judge acknowledged your grounds for divorce, then you could talk about asset division. But if you couldn't prove fault, you could walk away. I mean, we can't make you a slave to another individual, but you can't carry anything with you, including the children. You got to leave with what you came in with, man or woman. You got to leave the children. You got to leave the assets. You got to leave the houses. You got to leave the land. You got to leave the money in the bank account. You got to do all of it. If all the financial incentives were removed from the equation, the divorce rate might not plummet because everyone is content and happy, but because ending a marriage would no longer be the path of least resistance. Staying together and working it out would be the path of least resistance, and then eventually everybody would be content and happy. Because we were more content and we were more happy whenever women weren't rewarded for being promiscuous, men weren't rewarded for being single and being philanderers, all kinds of stuff. We'd still have a divorce rate, obviously, but it would no longer be the default position. And I got a wide range. Most 99% of the comments agreed and were positive. And then a person whom I love dearly, who loves me way more than I deserve, and I hope I haven't used that to the point where it's meaningless. When I use that, I'm sincere. I'm sincere. The people in my life who are really, really in my life, who really, really love me, I don't know why. It's such a one-sided endeavor. But anyway, forget about that. Her situation is not what's spoken about, but yet she put herself in the post. That's a human condition. I'm not saying she shouldn't have done it. If I read a post on the internet and it hits close to home, I take it personally, and then I have to think through it. Well, this person don't even know me, you know? So that's the way it is. Now, this person that I'm talking about, they had no choice in their situation, and that's all I'm going to say. Nothing I say today would apply to them as far as just leaving somebody. Okay? So let's get into it. I just wanted to lay that caveat. First off, since it is Free for All Friday, Liam Mateo, good to see you. Good morning. Hitman, good morning. And Sadie Hopkins raising her hands. Thank you so much. Now I can see the live chat. All right, so I'm going to go back to my show notes, and I won't be able to see your live chat. I need to get, the way I had it on Restream, a little icon, but the problem is I put the icon up in the top right corner. Y'all won't be able to see the chat. I don't know. There's some pros and cons. But anyway, let's, hold on, let me make sure I change so when I type, welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining live. Please like and share. All right, now, I won't be able to see your comments. Let's get into it. So I have a rule. I do not comment on private personal situations when I've only heard one side of the story. You never know the whole story. It's unfair to the people involved for me to do so. There may very well be legitimate reasons that are unknown to the public or the person asking the question that we will never figure out. What I will say, and I know I'm repeating this, but it bears repeating. What I will say is based off my is based off my personal observation and experience, which is fairly widespread. So my comments today are not about any specific woman or any specific congregation, although I think the original question was about a specific woman in a congregation. So that's why I'm really taking the time to make sure that this, whoever's in this scenario, I'm not talking about you. Okay? Now, I'm not afraid to talk about an individual. I've done it before. But in this situation, in this topic, that it's too emotionally charged, and there's no way to know all of the situation. I cannot comment on that situation. So let's frame this scenario and try to talk about it as a scenario stripped from any personalities. So here's the scenario. A woman tells a group of Christian women that she is going to leave her husband, not because he has committed adultery, not because he has fornicated, not because he has abandoned her or is abusing her, simply because she is unhappy simply because she is unhappy with how things turned out. And not one woman in that group tells her that leaving her husband without biblical grounds is wrong. What does that say about the congregation? So that was, in essence, the question. So here's where I want to go with it. Let me walk you through 3 key points I believe every church and every individual needs to consider. The Bible does not sanction no-fault divorce. Modern church women are discipled more by culture than Titus chapter 2. I'm going to repeat that one. Modern church women, modern women in the church, they are discipled, informed more by culture than by Titus chapter 2, and churches fear feminine backlash more than they fear God. Churches fear feminine backlash more than they fear God. Now, I am not afraid whatsoever to point out actual congregations where this is the truth. And I've talked about one extensively. So the Bible does not sanction no-fault divorce. We're going to just do this point by point. The Bible does not sanction no-fault divorce. Well, first off, let's look at Jesus' teaching on divorce. Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 through 9. So the Pharisees came to him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Well, that settles it. Jesus doesn't give permission for someone to end a marriage just because they're unhappy. All right? In verse 9, he says, Whosoever shall put away his wife except it be for fornication, and marries another commits adultery, and whoever marries her, whosoever marries her that's been put away doth also commit adultery. Now, that's not the verbatim quote, but I mean, just go read it. Tell me if I missed anything. So there's no permission by Jesus to end a marriage just because you're unhappy. Now let's talk about the context and clarification from the language and the law. The Greek word translated divorce in Matthew chapter 19 is apoluo. It's used of sending out disciples to go on a mission trip rather. It means to send away or dismiss. A proper divorce involves a formal act. You have to have a writ of divorcement and you have to have a sending away, which would be recognized under civil law. That's the thing. The government has to be involved if it's a divorce. If it's not, it's just a separation. And that matters. Now, that doesn't mean that the government dictates who's joined together and who's put asunder. That's God's job. Read the text. But it puts structure around what Jesus meant when he talked about sending someone away. You can't just send someone, you can't just abandon somebody, which would be sending them away, but you're creating the distance, not them, and then say, see, we're divorced. You can't do that. So Paul's inspired allowance for separation, and I think this is important. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul, inspired by the Holy Spirit, revealing the will of Christ, allowed for a departure due to the present distress. And I don't want to get into the situation there in Corinth. There was some issue with the economy. There was some issue with the culture, and it was hostile to Christians. And evidently there were Christian spouses in Corinth who had questions about, well, what about if my non-Christian spouse is not a Christian, and what about if they try to leave because it's too bad in Corinth? Well, leaving for the safety of oneself is not the same as dissolving a marriage covenant. There is a difference between a separation and a divorce. I argue that in cases of physical or emotional abuse, a woman or a man may depart for his or her own safety and well-being. But unless the cause is fornication, the departing spouse cannot remarry. The one who departs, even if the present distress is so great that they decide to be a eunuch for the kingdom for the rest of their life, instead of remaining married to their spouse, then they have two choices: remain unmarried and celibate, or be reconciled to that spouse. You got to work it out. Now, there are cases where it cannot be worked out. That's very tragic. But you're bound to that spouse. So you cannot leave and remain, or you cannot leave and remarry because your spouse was abusive in any way. Abusive. Doesn't matter, emotional, physical, whatever. Now, you can leave and create space and be safe, but you will always be married to that spouse. Now, you can tell that spouse, look, I'm going to remain celibate. I'm going to live for God. And if you got a spouse that's emotionally abusive, that's physically abusive, it ain't going to be too long before they fornicate. Now, that's not the waiting game. And I just realized I sounded like artificial intelligence there. Ironically enough, I've left my notes a few minutes ago, or about a minute ago. Anyway, I guess I see now why AI, when it's generating what it thinks is my voice, I guess I see now why it talks in that subversive way. Yeah, because I just said you can create space and get away, but you'll always be married to that person. And you can talk to that person and say, look, I'm going to live for God. I'm going to be celibate. And if you don't do the same thing and you fornicate, I'm going to slap your butt with a writ of divorcement and I'm going to be free from you. Look, that's different. That's not the waiting game. That's not a rush to the courthouse. In fact, in that case, the government has very little to do with whether or not that marriage is legitimate. I hope I've made myself clear on that. If I haven't made myself clear, or if you're not understanding what I'm saying, it's not your fault, it's mine. Ask me questions in the comments. All right. So I think we've got that down. You can leave an abusive spouse, but you can never be remarried, and you have to be celibate for the rest of your life, or you can stay and work it out. That's your options, folks. So let's talk about covenant preservation. Malachi chapter 2, verse 16 says something interesting that I did not have this epiphany until just today. And the reason is because every time I've debated this with people and talked about it, they say, God hates divorce. Well, the King James translates it, for the Lord, the God of Israel, saith that he hateth putting away. Now I'm going to do something on the fly here. I'm going to go to my trusty rusty e-sword, and I'm going to look up, for the Lord, the God of Israel, saith he hateth putting away. What does the word putting away mean? It's, well, that's funny. It looks like it's shalak. To send away, to let go, to stretch out, to send off, to send away, look, there's one usage of the word: to be sent off, to be put away, to be divorced, to be impelled. I think it's understood with Malachi and with Jesus. Jesus would be using this word. I don't know. It's very interesting. Now, let me tell you why I'm doing this. This is deep and theological and might not. Whoa, that was loud. And might not have any interest, bear any interest to you. But the Greek word in Matthew 19:9 for divorce is apoluo, and it doesn't mean divorce. All right, let me go to Matthew 19:9. Now, before you start thinking that I'm agreeing with some of these crazy, weird, false teachers out here, that I don't. I think they have drawn way more conclusion than the evidence ever suggests. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be. Well, see, the word divorce is not in there. Well, why is that? Well, apoluo, it means to free fully. That is, relieve, release, dismiss, or let die. Let me understand why divorce is a perfectly good situation, is a perfectly good translation for that in Matthew 19:9, even though the King James says shall put away. Because the word itself carries with it a formality. In Malachi chapter 2, now don't laugh at me, you folks that speak Hebrew, the shalak or shalak, it carries with it, for the usage of divorce, it carries with it a formality. But both words can be used in an informal way. Let me explain what I mean. Let me see. In the book of Acts, Acts 3:12 through 13. And when Peter saw it, he answered the people, ye men of Israel, why marvel ye at this, or why look ye so earnestly on us, as though by our own power or holiness we had made this man to walk? The God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob and the God of our fathers hath glorified his Son, Jesus, whom ye delivered up and denied him in the presence of Pilate when he was determined to let him go. That word is apoluo. When he was determined to let him go. Now, he wasn't determined to divorce Jesus, but he was determined to send him away, to put him away formally. All right? And there's other places where this word, whoops, I don't need that. I need apoluo. Where are you at? Right here. So there's other places. Let me see in Acts 13:3. And when they had fasted and prayed and laid their hands on them, they sent them away. That's in the larger context of sending disciples. And I think that's Barnabas and Paul. Yeah, Barnabas and Paul. Because the next section is Barnabas and Saul on Cyprus. Well, that sent them away, that's a formal sending away. So in the context of a marriage, what is a formal sending away? Well, you have to have a writ of divorcement, and you have to have a separation. You have to create space. For the Lord God of Israel saith he hateth putting away. That's creating space with a formal, in a formal way. Now, for the context in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, there is a putting away or a sending away or a creating space, I guess I should say. But it's not for the purpose. It's not a formal thing. It's just separation. So I don't believe 1 Corinthians 7 verses 10 through 11 allows just for me to violate a vow that I made before God and man and just say, yeah, I'm not going to be married to this woman anymore. Look, I've been chemically castrated, so sex is not an issue for me. I can be a eunuch for the rest of my life. I'm just going to not fulfill my vow. Folks, that's not acceptable. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 doesn't allow for that. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 10 and 11. Here's what, the Apostle Paul wrote, and unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. Let's go to Trusty Rusty, and let's get that. 1 Corinthians 7, where are you at? 10. Got to scroll down. You can't just click it. All right. And unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. So he's repeating what Jesus said. Let the wife depart. Excuse me, talking about changing the Bible, I left out a word. Let not the wife depart from her husband. But, and if she depart, so in other words, if she depart, she has to let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife. This word put away is aphthemi. And I don't know. Yep, it's a cognate of apoluo. The beginning part of that word is apo. Anyway, that's interesting. You may fact check me. I don't know if that meets the minimum requirements for a cognate or not, but I think it's very telling that. Anyway, forget about that. Okay, to the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord. So this is Jesus' command. Let not the wife depart from her husband, but and if she depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. But so this is adversarial to what? So it's I say adversarial. It's but. So to the contrary, the rest is revelation from me. So it is adversarial technically, but the two principles that are being communicated are not adversarial. They're, if you want to learn a $5 word, they are epexegetical. They build and inform on one another. So here's what Paul says. If any brother hath a wife that believeth not, so she's not a Christian, and she be pleased to dwell with him, there's no reason. Let him not put her away. That's the idea. There's no reason to put her away. And the woman which hath a husband that does not believe, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, there's no reason to leave. Let her not leave him. Because the word for, the word for there is gar, gamma, alpha, rho. Because the unbelieving husband is sanctified, set apart by the wife, not set apart toward God, but set apart toward the spouse. Okay? And the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else, your children would be bastards. That's what that means. Your children would be unclean. But now are they holy? In other words, your children are legitimate. That means that a Muslim and a Christian can be married to one another. And that means that a Muslim and a Christian do not divorce one another because of their opposing faiths. Okay? But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. So if you're a Christian and you marry a Muslim, if they're willing to dwell with you and raise children with you, all that's legitimate. But if they depart, you cannot keep that person there against their will. They were never under the bondage of a slave. They were never under that kind of bondage. The bondage is the bondage of a slave, doulo, or douloi. Douloi. Actually, it's douloi, I think. But anyway, I don't pronounce Greek very well. So that's that. That's the full nuance and context. So God's will is for the marriage covenant to be preserved. Vows, covenant, contentments, the next section. So here's the things. Your feeling, how you feel, your feelings, they don't cancel your vows. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 4 through 6. And when thou vowest a vow, defer not to pay it. Boy, I tell you, we're going to get that whole context. I think. eSword used to be so much better to navigate. All right. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it. For he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou vowest, or which thou vowed. Better is it that you should not vow, than thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy thy work of thine hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also different vanities, but fear thou God. That's what a lot of these young women leaving their husbands should be told. That's what a lot of these husbands divorcing their spouses should be told. That's what a lot of these young men and young women should be told. You're not living for yourself. It's not your best life now. You orient yourself towards the highest possible good of which you can conceive, and that means living for somebody else. But if you have to live for others and esteem others better than self on this earth, in eternity, it's just going to be, the hierarchy is going to be you and God. That's it. Marriage is a covenant. We have to remember this. Marriage is a covenant before God. Proverbs chapter 2, verse 17 refers to a woman who forsaketh the guide of her youth and forgetteth the covenant of her God. The very words of your mouth can send you to hell if you violate a vow and don't repent. If you violate a vow and stand before God and say, it was a mistake, I ever made the vow. That's a hard one, a really hard one. There's not one verse that gives you the green light to break a covenant because things got hard or didn't go the way you hoped. Philippians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. We're going to go there. I said we're going to go there. I'm trying to force myself to get better at navigating. I'm trying to force myself to get better at navigating eSword. Yeah. All right. Philippians 4, starting in verse 11. Oops, that's 3. Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned, in whatsoever state I am in, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased and how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Here's the thing. Do you think my mother and father, who were married at 15 and 17, for about the first 4 or 5 years of their life, they were very, very, very poor, and they moved around quite a bit, chasing work. My father worked in Detroit for a few years before he came back and started with a Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company as a computer programmer. And my father was also in the military. While they were in the military, my mother and father, Betty and Bill, they told me much about how they survived. She would have been counseled to leave him in modernity. Those young kids had problems. And what were they told by the adults around them? Suck it up, buttercup. Welcome to adulthood. And so my parents would tell me about what they ate. And at the beginning of the month, they would go buy salted pork, bacon, beans, and cornmeal and flour, bacon grease, or Crisco. I can't remember. Anyway, and they ate very, very poorly. In fact, they ate noodles. They ate macaroni and cheese with stewed tomatoes a lot. They ate stewed potatoes a lot. They ate beans a lot with a little salted fat back in it. And they just scraped by. And now, by the time I come along, I'm looking at them living in a house on a hill, close to, well, what is it? Close to 3,000. I think it's about 2,500 square feet, 2,600 square feet. Nice place, nice house on the hill in Northwest Tennessee. And, you're thinking, well, that's it. That's the dream. And then you propose to this little old gal, and this little old gal thinks that, and the boy and the girl thinks that they're going to get the house on the hill that's close to 3,000 square foot and all this, that, and the other. But they don't understand you don't start where other people finished, You see, it's not that I speak in respect of want, because I have learned in whatever condition I am therewith to be content. And we need to understand that as a woman, you're not living for yourself, and as a man, you're not living for yourself. When I first started preaching, I would talk about this, and I would say that that I remember as a child, the first time I heard of this concept was Oprah Winfrey, whenever she talked about how you need to have an identity separate and apart from your husband is what they were telling women. Like, no, if you have an identity separate and apart from your husband and your children, you're schizophrenic. Now, you can have things that are not their things, just like men can have things that are not their things. But a man is always a husband and a father. His identity is his family. And a woman should be the same. A woman nor a man needs an identity outside of their roles as the family. That's schizophrenic. It's wrong. That's bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Rather humorous story in Bible class, I was talking about being related to people, and I was trying to come up, I said, nobody can be more related than, and I was trying to think, are you more related to your son or to your brother or to your father? And then somebody popped up in the back, your wife. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah. It's bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. How did I miss that? It's a help meet for you. That's how that works, folks. You can't be schizophrenic. I can't be Tony separate from, I can't be Tony podcaster separate from Tony husband. Period. Nor can you be Sally whatever separate and apart from Sally the wife and mother. Husband and father, as I should say. Or husband and father to Tony, and Sally and wife and mother to the woman. We don't run just because we're unhappy. And I know Paul is not speaking of marriage in Philippians chapter 4, but that applies in marriage. Modern church women are discipled, are informed, are taught, are more obedient to culture than Titus chapter 2. Okay? Let's talk about the biblical pattern of woman-to-woman teaching. Go to Titus chapter 2, verses 3 through 5. Read it with me. All right? I'm going. Titus 2. The aged women, likewise. Actually, I'm just going to do. Titus is commanded by Paul to teach. Well, what are you to teach? Well, the aged women you are to teach that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet. That means you don't draw attention to yourself. You're of a sound mind, sane, you're temperate. You're not loud, you're not a Karen. There ain't nothing worse than a loud, obnoxious woman that thinks that she can step up and I'm just, this is going to make me unpopular. There's nothing worse than a loud, obnoxious woman who is so entitled she thinks she can step into a man's position but still receive the chivalrous protection of her gender that her gender should afford her. When you step up into a men's realm, and I learned this the hard way when I was working security at them nightclubs and bars, a woman will do violence, physical violence in that situation much quicker than a man because they don't understand. They're so entitled, they think, well, you can't hit a woman. I hit plenty of them. It didn't bother me a bit. If you're going to step up as a man and square off with me, especially if you got a weapon, I'm taking you out. In the name of women's liberation, equality, doesn't bother me a bit. You are a threat. I will neutralize you, and I will do it as 21st century, a modern 21st century male. I will not look at your gender at all. You see, the pattern is woman-to-woman teaching, to be discreet, to be chaste, not promiscuous. to be keepers at home. Mind your business and mind your home. Don't keep up with the Kardashians. Good. Obedient to their own husbands. Folks, that's a hard one. You have to obey your husband. Now, your husband has to dwell with you in knowledge. So if you have a husband that's trying to leverage Ephesians 5 in order to get you to take out the trash, that's a different issue. I've had that very conversation. I've had people in the past send me messages, please do a podcast on how I can get my wife to obey me. She doesn't want to obey me. I'm like, okay. And I've done those podcasts several times in the past, and it never goes the way the men think it's going to go. Now, here's the thing. Very rarely, in fact, it has never happened that I've had a woman want to have a podcast on how she can have her husband love her more in alignment with the way Christ loved the church. Now, I've talked to women about that, but there's never been a time where a woman has come to me and wanted that content. They always want it to be, in other words, the difference is usually what I've found, and this is odd because this flies in the face of some things that I've witnessed personally as far as how society goes, some societal norms. But the woman will come and they'll be like, hey, I need some help. I'm having problems in my marriage and my husband is not loving to me, or my husband it's very difficult. He's making great demands of me and I don't know what my obligations are. So I've had that several times, but they don't want a public podcast about it. They want to know the solution so they can be better and to help their husband. That's the people that I get. The husbands that I've gotten that have wanted to know how to leverage Ephesians 5 to make their wives do what they say, they always wanted a public podcast, I think, so they can have their wives listen to it. It's very interesting that. So again, it never goes the way they go, because guess what? If you're a woman and you said, hey, my husband isn't loving me the way Christ loved the church, and I want you to do a podcast and show from Scripture how they must treat me with the respect that their wife needs to be treated with, the podcast would be about how you need to be a woman worth respecting, and if you're a woman worth respecting, then your man will respect you more. That's a very short podcast, but I expand that out and I give all the nuance. So if a man gives me a podcast on, hey, can you do a podcast about my wife needs to obey me? I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that. So the question is, how can I get my wife to be a more Christian wife and an obedient wife? Well, you need to be a better husband. That's how you do that. So that's the answer. If you're having troubles with your spouse, you need to be a better spouse. Period. Now, again, all of that flies out the window whenever pathological, persistent abuse starts. And then you have to decide if the present distress is enough for you to live like a eunuch for the rest of your life, or do you to work it out? And that's a decision that those people make on their own. But this is not what's in consideration for the podcast. The consideration for the podcast is somebody that life is going pretty good. They just ain't happy with the way things work out. Maybe they're living in a tiny house instead of a 3,000 square foot house. Maybe they're living in Maine instead of Ohio, or maybe they're maybe they don't have as good a job, or their husband doesn't have as good a job as they would want them to have. Maybe they can't take Disney vacations like everybody else is. We're talking about folks like that. Whenever those two people want to decide to break up because it's too hard, the older women and the older men need to tell them to suck it up and welcome to adulthood. And the judge needs to say, you don't have any grounds for divorce. You need to go home and be thankful with what God gave you. That was a little bit of a Freudian slip. You need to be thankful with, that implies cooperation. You and your spouse be thankful for what God gave you. And you individually need to be thankful for this spouse that God gave you. Women, a woman speaks up and says she's not happy, and instead of pointing her to Scripture, the older women will tell her to follow her heart, to do what's best for her. That is not the kind of guidance Titus chapter 2 calls for. That's the world slipping into the pews and calling itself wisdom. You see, there has been a rise of gynocentricity in the culture, which means, to a lesser extent, there has been a rise of gynocentricity in the church. Gynocentrism puts women at the center of all moral reasoning. Believe all women, #MeToo, her truth, live her best life, slay queen, all this good stuff. You want to be boss women. Okay. Well, this gynocentrism, it elevates her truth over God's truth, over the truth. Jesus, chapter 17 of the book of John, sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. Truth that doesn't come from the word of God is not truth at all, no matter how good it sounds. And then what happens is we have an inverted leadership model in the church. As for my people, children are oppressors over them, and women rule over them. That has happened in the church. Church women must teach other women with Scripture, not slogans. Period. Which brings me to my next point. Churches feel the feminine backlash oftentimes more than they fear God. They'll never say it, but they act in that way. Remember COVID. That was all driven by feminine energy. If we just save one person, it's worth it. No. We don't ever make any decisions based off that. Galatians chapter 1, verse 10, Paul opines, for do I now persuade God or men or God? You read the context. What would he be if he decided to persuade or cater to men over God? John 12, verse 43, for they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God. These people that believed Jesus, but they wouldn't openly support him or follow him. There are many men in the church that I've talked to that recognize this, but they keep their mouth shut. They sew their lips together because they fear. I mean, they got to live with these women, and they don't have the stones and the backbone to set their women in order. That goes all the way back to the garden. That's why man is in a fallen state, because Adam did not set his woman in order. Let me ask you this. If it is true that all of the death in the world happened because Eve ate the fruit from the serpent, what do you think Adam should have done, and how extreme should he have been to keep her from doing that? If it saved every life, if it kept mankind from falling from grace. I guess it wouldn't be falling from grace. You don't need grace if you're sinless. So mankind was in a relationship with God that needed no grace, no mitigator, no advocate, nothing. Then what do you think Adam, what do you think Adam would be justified in doing? Do you think he'd have been justified in balling up his fists and knocking her teeth out so she wouldn't talk to Satan anymore? Think about that. What would you have done in that situation that would have saved the whole world? Maybe he would have said, Eve, you need to shut up and not pay attention to that stupid beast. Don't eat that fruit. Well, I'm going to eat that fruit because what you're saying is true, but I don't like your tone. You feel me? And then what should Adam have done? Escalate, because the world's at stake. You see, silence equals compromise. When a congregation allows a woman to announce her unbiblical intentions without correction, what they're really is saying is we don't want to make her upset and we don't want to lose her. Well, she's already gone. Here's the watchman's responsibility. Let's go Ezekiel 33, starting in verse 7. I will get better at doing this. So thou, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at thy mouth. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me. When I say unto the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die. If you don't speak to warn them, they're going to die. He's going to die in his way. And his blood's going to be required at your hand. But if you warn them and he doesn't turn, he might still die. But the difference is you're justified. Okay, first you get the point from that. I didn't realize what time it was. I gotta dig in and go. We're almost done though. 1 Timothy 5:20, it commands, and this is of elders though, but the principle is the same. Them that sin rebuke before all, so that the others may fear. There is a sense in which this should be public. If you've got a person in your congregation, man or woman, that says, I'm just not happy with my spouse, I'm going to leave them. No, you can't do that. If you do that, we're going to withdraw fellowship from you. You can't just come up here all willy-nilly and withdraw from your spouse, or withdraw from your spouse and leave your spouse because you don't like the way things are. You have to explain it to the church. Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel. If you keep quiet when sin is out in the open, you're not neutral. You've taken a side. That's the problem with the gynocentricity in the church. The modern women are so entitled. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do with no accountability whatsoever. And there is no accountability for women. Not in this society. I will stand by that. I don't care how unpopular it makes me. When a woman says publicly she's leaving her husband for no biblical reason, the church must respond lovingly, firmly, biblically, not out of rage or gossip, but out of love and concern for her soul and the soul's watching. We must speak the truth in love, but if we're not speaking in love of the truth, then the truth won't accomplish the right thing, because we're going to be mitigating the truth and delivering the truth in such a way that the people that are outside of the truth can march in hell with a puffed out chest thinking they're going to heaven. We need to teach our women to hold the truth. The older women need to speak with the clarity and weight Titus chapter 2 gives them. And the men, especially the elders, need to be brave enough to say, sister, this isn't the way of Christ. Remember, the Titus chapter 2, older men teach the younger men, older women teach the younger women, flies out the window if the older women are a bunch of modern feminists. And most of them that I've seen are. Most of them that I've seen are. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, you got to understand how many I've seen. So there's a lot of folks listening to this. This don't apply to you. But I guarantee you it is in your congregation. It's something you've got to deal with. I wish. Oh, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. I'd make a list of congregations that I know for a fact are doing it right and congregations that I know for a fact are doing it wrong, because it's easily seen. When we fear hurting someone's feelings more than we fear God, we have already left the faith. It's time to repent. The church must not be silent when it's declared openly, when sin is declared openly. Not ever. So may we always be the voice of righteousness, and let's get the voice of righteousness back where it belongs, in the church. Let's hold the word of God and hold to the word of God and stop echoing the world. Let's do it with confidence, because the truth still matters and it still saves. Now, here we go. Let's see what we've got. Good to see everybody. Man, y'all, I am so ecstatic about the folks that we have watching. Good afternoon, everybody. All these folks in Rumble, thank you so much. Hey, Alabama. Where are we at? Let me get up here. Oh, we got a lot of... Man, we got a lot of stuff. All right, there we go. That's right, Sadie Hopkins. Give him the glory. Give him the glory. Ashton Perez, thank you very much. Hitman, modern women, often elders' wives, rule a lot of congregations by proxy because the elders don't want to rock the boat. Preach it, my man. Or woman. No, it's Hitman, yeah. Sorry, I don't know some of you names on Rumble. Thank you, Ashton Perez. Noah Theodore, all over should be careful on it. Yes, you know that respect becomes respect. Relationship and lasting and respect. Yes, I get you. Hey, Alabama, churches should do a better job of teaching what abuse is instead of telling women they need to stay in an abusive relationship because God hates divorce. Would you please preach that? Good grief, man. Yes, that's the problem is whenever you start talking about this, people don't understand what abuse really is. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, I typically, if yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Just because you ain't happy and just because you ain't getting your way don't mean you're abused. So shut up. I have heard people argue before from 1 Peter 3:1 that wives are to be subject to their husbands just as slaves were obedient to their masters, so that the likewise in 1 Peter 3:1 goes back to the slave and his master in chapter 2, and that just as a servant has to be in subjection to his master, not only the gentle but also the harsh, so also the women must be to their husband. Some have used this to argue against women divorcing from their husbands for beating them. Yeah, that is, anytime you have a proposition that proves to, or an argument that proves too much, it proves nothing at all, because that would contradict the present distress principle in 1 Corinthians 7. Very good pull there, Robert Lady. Thank you so much. Women are to obey their husbands as the default, and you ought to call him Lord. Now, what does that look like in modernity? Speak to him respectfully. We live in the modern world, so we forget what men are. Let me just put that out there. Women forget what kind of monsters men are. And the liberal women, no, we don't. We know it. No, you don't. The fact that you can, the fact you have a voice tells me that you don't actually understand how monstrous men are. If in the United States of America today, we said there will be no women voting, there will be no women spaces, there will be no women doing anything, and all women will have to wear burqas, you'd wear them because we'd make you. And there's nothing you could do about it if all the men in the United States of America did that. And you might be, well, we'd leave, or no, we'd make you. You don't understand force. You don't understand force. That's why there's the command, men are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. Because that would be wrong. It'd be sinful. It'd be anti-God, anti-Christ. But it'd still be possible if we wanted to do it. And it's not just that there's nothing you could do. It's that you would be so totally and utterly powerless, it might not even make the news. Like it wouldn't even the thing that you could do to defend against that would be nothing. There wouldn't even be an interruption in our daily lives, except for the fact that every woman's wearing a burqa. Anyway. Now again, you need strong men, godly men, to stop that from happening, because there are ungodly men who want to do that. They're Muslims. Am I wrong? Tell me I'm wrong. Show me where I'm wrong. If it were the case that a religion ruled the world, and I mean rule, would you rather have a Christian-ruled world or a Muslim-ruled world? Anyway, it don't have anything to do with what we're doing today, but there it is. Hey, Alabama, I hope I didn't miss any. Yeah, Jason Goldtrap. Exactly. Report crime. That's the thing. If a lot of times I don't think that you, a lot of times if you tell me you're being abused, I always ask, well, have you involved the law? If you ain't involved the law, I don't believe you when it comes to physical abuse. If you haven't involved the law, I don't think you're getting abused. You've got to involve the law. Prove it. Here's the thing. When it comes to accusations, this deal of believe all women, if a woman comes to me and says, I'm being abused, hey, I'm sorry, I'll help you out. But if a woman comes to me and says, my husband is abusing me, okay, prove it. See, that's an accusation. You have to prove it. Yeah, I got a lot of comments. All right. Yeah, feelings do not cancel vows, and feelings rule in modern society. Modern church women would tell her to dump him and find her own happiness. Yep. Hey, Alabama says, I used to have a much older friend. When she complained to her dad about her husband, he told her she made her bed, now lie in it. That's it. That's it. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom to that. Well, where is it? Oh, well, there it is. All right. No Karens in the Bible. I have missed comments, guys. That's why you don't buy your wife appliances for birthdays and holidays unless she asks for them. They aren't for her. They're for the entire household. Thank you very much. Yes. Now, I did get my wife a vacuum cleaner for Christmas last Christmas. Yes. Yeah, that last Christmas. But that was a special deal. Like, that was a special vacuum cleaner. That's something, And here's the thing, though. I got her something else, too. But she wanted that vacuum cleaner. It's an automatic vacuum cleaner. But anyway, we'll leave there. That's right, Jason. To address her as Mrs. Jones Smith implies she's divorced. I still follow that rule. Where'd that go? Yeah, not so long ago, Joan Smith, wife of Bill, would be addressed as Mrs. Bill Smith. Yes, that's the way it's supposed to be. Mr. and Mrs. Bill Smith. Or Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Jason Goldtrap, best Bible study ever. Well, thank you. Be a biblical man, and she will likely love and respect you. Hey, Alabama says, I know women who have been told if they don't mind their husbands, they aren't a good wife. Your wife isn't a dog. True. But she's got to obey. And the mitigation is in the Lord. If you give her, like sometimes you got to command. I've commanded my wife before, and she didn't want to do what I said, but she did. And it turned out I knew more than her in that situation. I knew more about the situation, and I didn't have time to explain the details to her. And so it's one of those very rare occasions where she asked, why? I said, because I said so and I'm your husband. Period. Now, here's the thing. If you go to that well all the time, it loses its power. I think that's what these weak men misunderstand about Ephesians 5. You do have the elders in the church have the authority to tell every member of the congregation to be at the church building Monday morning at 5 a.m. And if you don't go, then you're in sin because we have given you we've given you an order as the eldership, and we watch for your souls. Now, here's the rub. If it is the case that the situation and scenario warrants that much authority being exercised, they have the authority to do that. And you'd go to hell if you didn't show up. But if they say, hey, look, we're going to have a Bible class at 5 a.m. on Sunday morning. If y'all don't show up, we're going to count that as you rebelling against God. They don't have the authority to do that. That's not godly. These things are not that difficult if you just put a little reason to them. And I'm not saying like you as in you folks talking in the comment section. I'm saying you as in you and me. Folks, I'm going to run out of time. 99% of the times people respect you if you project confidence and authority. This applies from Sunday school teachers to the President of the United States. You got that right. And good morning, Mike Osnes. And if I had a preacher friend say he has never counseled a woman about lust or a man about resentment, generally speaking, yeah, I can see that. Women and men have different problems. It's supposed to be it's on YouTube. Men are taught to fight for their marriage, family, and women are taught they deserve better. Yes, and Hitman, one of our issues is women their whole lives have been told what to expect from a man, not how to treat a man, and men their whole lives have been taught how to treat a woman, but not what to expect from a woman. Men have obligations and duties. Women have obligations and duties. I bet you $100 without Google or ChatGPT, nobody in this chat could adequately articulate a woman's duties. Think about that. Hymenaeus was delivered to Satan. You got that right. I'm going to have to skip some of these comments, guys. I'm coming in late, and you may have dealt already with it, but it's the same with the men. Yes, it is the same with the men, but remember, in this gynocentric society, it's all skewed in favor of the women. That's right. Be not conformed to this world, but transformed by the renewing of your mind. The world wants to mold you, but God wants to renew you. You got that right. And the NIV says the pattern of this world. Do not think like the world. Abuse is a slap. I don't feel happy is not abuse. And I don't think abuse is a slap either. I take the Sean Connery position. I think a lot of times the way women fight, women are just as aggressive as men, but the way they fight is different. So within reason, I'm with Sean Connery, and I don't care who says anything about it. Go kick rocks, ride off a cliff, chase after them. There are women's shelters, police who are happy to help. You got that right. Yes, I have known. Have you never known a woman who's afraid of her husband? She would not go to the police, and often they end up dead. They end up dead because they don't go to the police. That is the weapon of the husband, to make her feel isolated and alone, like nobody will help her. And what you've seen is movies in the past that use this trope because it's good drama. But no, that doesn't happen in society with any regularity, that a woman goes to the police and says, my husband is abusing me, and the police do nothing about it if the husband is not actually abusing her. Now, if the woman goes to the police and says, my husband is abusing me, and there are marks and there is proof and there is evidence, then she has to file charges. She has to press charges. They're not going to do it for her. So what happens most of the time is a woman is getting abused, and the husband says, if you go to the police, I'll kill you. In a moment of strength, she decides to leave. She calls the police, and within the 48-hour detention that this guy gets put into jail, she goes and gets bail and bails him out. So yeah, it's I've got very little sympathy, really. Yeah, they can get all kinds of help. Well, they can get help, yes. And here's the thing. In the United States, you can get a weapon, and that we've got songs. Earl had to die. Like, you can do something. That's the thing. But it's that learned helplessness. Now, these are the situations, and this is what always happens. This is the what about the men do? This is what women always do. And I've got to get off here. But no, I don't buy that at all. You're right. I have never known a woman who is afraid to leave her husband that she wouldn't go to the police. I've never known one personally. Here's the thing. You don't always go to the police to handle that kind of situation. Sometimes you go to the Hells Angels. Sometimes you go to the Night Riders of Reelfoot Lake. You understand what I mean? Sometimes you go take a firearm class. And whenever that man comes home and he's in one of those moods, you bait him let him hit you a time or two, then you put that Smith & Wesson covered hammer 38 revolver that you got the heavy loads in, and you squeeze the bang stick till you quit hearing noise. And then you call 911. So yeah, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it that women are strong and independent and bosses and can do everything men can do, yet a woman can be so weak and intimidated and fearful that she has no power to protect herself. That's feminist. That's feminism creeping into the mindset and to the church. So yeah, I don't buy that at all. Yeah, and stop teaching your daughter to be nice to men just because it's the polite thing to do. That gets them into abusive relationships. We got to quit teaching everybody to be nice. Oh, hold on. I guess but yeah, Connie says, but you said if she doesn't go to the police and then she isn't being abused. That's not what I said, Connie. You need to go back and listen to it. And you'll be able to after the live stream. Well, you're on Facebook. You should go back to listen to it. I greatly mitigated that statement. I didn't give that as a one and done statement. But here's the thing, Connie Barden, if you come to me and say, I'm being abused, I'm going to weep with you and cry with you and everything like that. But if you come to me and say, my husband is being abused, now you've got to prove it. Because I am morally obligated to be skeptical, because that's an accusation, and your husband will be guilty until he's proven or innocent until he's proven guilty. So the easiest way there is you go document it at the law enforcement office. And again, that man ain't going to kill you if you go to the cops. Now, if you're dealing with somebody like this in Trinidad, Aragua, or a gang or something like that, then I don't care. If you married a gang member and you're getting abused, I mean, I guess just stay there and die. I don't have any sympathy for you other than the sympathy that I would have for a normal human being in that situation. But you made your bed, you're going to lie in it, and if you lay down with dogs, you're going to get up with fleas. So you're going to have to do something like going to witness protection. Like the deeper you get into evil, the harder it is to come out, and the less chance you have of coming out of it unscathed. So the problem is we've got an incongruent, dissonant message that women are getting over the last 50 years. You're boss, you're powerful, you can do anything a man can do, but you're so weak and helpless that if a man is abusing you, you can't even go to the police and take care of it, or you can't go get a firearm and take care of it, or you can't protect yourself. Which one is it? That's the point. That's the gynocentrism. And yes, a restraining order is very effective. You are correct. It does not stop someone, but what it does, it is an escalation. So you get a restraining order. So if the person comes back around, now you have an avenue of escalation. So yes, it takes, the problem is whenever this starts, the woman who is abused is so beat down and helpless that she, and I've gone way over my time. I've got 5 minutes. The woman is so, by the time the abuse gets that bad, she's so beat down and abused that she feels so helpless that if she does go to the police, that's about all she can do, because she doesn't have the bandwidth nor the tenacity. It's been beat out of her to do more. So the problem is not the fact that the police are impotent. The problem is that the woman is not advocating for herself, which is why now in modernity, we have an abuse advocacy system that is parallel to the legal system. It's very important. I know a person who went to the police. She had a restraining order. The man walked up to her in a line at Church's Chicken and shot her in the head. This I know personally. Yeah, but that doesn't negate anything that I've said, Connie. That was going to happen with or without a restraining order. It's not that restraining orders can be violated. It's that restraining orders are effective because it's documentation. Now, what should have happened? I don't know, but I guarantee you, if we knew all the entailments of this situation, we could craft a scenario where that woman could have acted more and advocated for herself more and not been in that situation for where that man done that. We have to take responsibility for our actions. That's the issue with women. Women are told you're not accountable for anything in modern society. They're told they're given privilege and respect and a place in society, and there's no obligation, no expectation of obligation. And so they're told you're boss babes, you're boss women, you can do anything a man can do, and you're so weak and sensitive and helpless that a man can just tell you to stay home and beat on you, and there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot have both of these. You cannot have both of these. My point is that not all cases can be put into a one-size-fits-all box. Connie, I want you to answer this in the chat. Do you think I'm putting all cases in a one-size-fits-all box? As long as you've listened to me, do you think that's my MO and what I do? I would like to know, because I don't like this kind of conversation. I'm not doing that, and you're accusing me of doing that, and I'm not. There's nothing you've said that denies anything that I've said. So you need to think about that. All right. I don't have time to wait for this. I got to get off the deal here. I got to leave. I got an appointment at 3:00. Folks, this has been Tony Brewer with Cogitations. It's going to take me a minute, but to get this up on the podcast on Spreaker, but don't forget to watch us or to listen to us on Spreaker.com. This will stay up on Rumble. This will be on YouTube and Facebook and stay there. But be sure to go to the Tony Bruin community on Locals. We need 50 supporters, but we need as many people over there as possible. Thank you so much. God bless. And this is Connie Barn said, okay, but I want to know yes or no. Do you think that I am putting all scenarios into one box? I want to know that from you. Jason Goldtrap says, my Christian wife left me. I never cheated or hit her. Today she worships at a Church of Christ 15 minutes from me. How can we be on fellowship? Well, she has to repent of that. And she doesn't have to be married to you again. That's an interesting. I don't have enough time for that. But there is a situation where y'all can still be estranged from one another and both of you be right with God. So anyway, that's all I've got. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Spreaker, Locals. Look in the show notes. You'll find all the links. God bless you. Connie, I'd still like to hear from you. I want to know whether or not you think I'm putting all these things in a box, and I want to know whether or not you believe that I'm not allowing for the nuance. I understand the exceptions. Just from what little I heard, and maybe I didn't hear enough, but I'd say yes, then you have formed a prejudicial opinion about me. I would appreciate you not being so prejudicial. All right. So God bless everybody. This has been Tony Brewer with Cogitations, and we'll catch you on the flip side.